Everybody, welcome to Michigan Replay. Happy homecoming for the Wolverine faithful. 63-13, the final victory over Minnesota. Well, at least you did something in the second half this time.
Right, third quarter. We got shut out in the fourth quarter, Jim. All those points were in the third quarter.
You got to have something to complain about, right?
Exactly.
63-13, there was no way you expected that to happen against Minnesota because they hadn't lost in a blowout in their entire season. They'd played guys tough.
No, their largest defeat had been by 9 points. And the thing that scared me about in every offensive category, they were second to us. And one, they were ahead of us. Fleetwood was the #1 all-purpose ground gainer, or through the air and on the ground in the country. So I think our defense did a great job there. But, Jim, there was one thing you got to understand. After we played that many games of such magnitude, you got to give it to our kids to come up and play a hard game, and they did a very fine job, and that's partly due to senior leadership.
First series of downs, you get the ball, Wheatley rips one off tackle, and here you go right away for the big play.
Right, we wanted to mix it up a little bit. I knew Minnesota would be up there strong, and Derek gets behind him. Derek has a lot better speed than a lot of people think, and Elvis threw a strike there.
That broke Jim Harbaugh's all-time career passing yardage record, so Elvis Grbac holds that record now. But this play had to frost you more than any one of them.
Well, I think this may have broke one of the other records, but, you know, you score like that and that quickly, and then to have them come back, and this young man has great speed, and Lewis takes it all the way on a fake reverse is what really messed us up there, Jim.
That was the longest kick return ever against a Michigan football team. But even though they gained some momentum from that play, you took over in your next series and went right back to work offensively.
Right. I think the key was here that we were able to come back and score. And on a third down, key pass there from Elvis to Alexander. And then Wheatley gets to running here. Wheatley's getting better all the time. He's making better cuts in there, and he had a lot of nice gains in there today.
And then you go to a 3rd and 2 situation. Jesse Johnson, a little change of pace at your tailback.
Right, and there is a good hole there, but Jesse makes a good cut. But I think our blocking was pretty sharp there as well. Then here we go back, and there we catch him in man-to-man coverage, and Elvis throws an excellent strike out there to Derek in the corner. And those two really had a big day offensively.
No kidding. That makes it 14-7. And Jim Wagger over there in Minnesota sideline got to be wondering because they haven't been able to move the ball at all. And you're averaging nearly 7-8 yards a snap.
Right. That's what you like to do. If you're
no kidding. I guess so.
There was Wheatley, and then here comes Jesse back up inside. And it's good to have both of them in there back and forth. And then on 3rd and goal, we go back again. And Elvis really gets hit there and throws a nice strike to Derek again. That reminds you a little bit of hitting, what was that other kid's name? Oh, Howard.
Oh, how soon we forget.
Right.
Well, Desmond made a living doing that, but he used to dive for catches.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you going to put Nina Fagacon in the secondary
now? That looks like
now?
you, Jim, catching the ball right there.
If that were me, I'd have
quite
scored.
a catch for a tackle.
If that were me, I'd have scored.
Right, he caught it, and that's all hands right there. And Amani Toomer makes a great catch here. Elvis threw this a little high. For a freshman, he came up with a big catch.
Speaking of all hands, Amani Toomer's got some, huh?
Right, excellent hands. And here's Wheatley on a little counter play and picks up about 10 yards, and then Wheatley goes in on a draw play for the touchdown.
A little different draw in that you bring a guard around and trap, and the handoff is inside. Just a little different read for the defense?
Right, in that defense, you're better off trapping it sometimes the even front, so that works out well. Here our defense, I think you get an example of how they try to trap Fleetwood all day. And Jim, the key, the success of this whole game is one thing. They were 0 for 13 on 3rd down conversions.
And on 3rd down conversions, you guys did an awful good job. Here's a screen to Jesse Johnson. And great block here from Steve Everett, who gets outside. But you mixed it up as well offensively as I think I've seen you this year. Would you agree?
Yeah, we were using a lot of different people. Jesse there, then we come back and hit Tony McGee. Tony McGee picks up a nice block from Mark Burkholder there, then has a nice run. Tony has really helped us in the passing game because they have to cover our tight end now.
And then Eddie Davis gets in the ball game, and his first carry. How about this?
Yeah, Eddie really likes to hit this draw play, and he hits it very quick. And he has good running ability, and he's strong youngster for his size.
35-7 at halftime. Did you go into the locker room and say to the guys, okay, this is not going to happen like it did last week. We're going to come out in the second half and be intense? Did you tell them that? Did you make it a point?
Yes, and we'd also talked to before the game ever started, something we had to do. But the difference is, and you're going to see in the second half, we don't self-destruct. We have 3 penalties rather than 10. We have 31 yards of penalty. Jim realized going into this game we had been penalized for 446 yards. averaging 73 yards a game penalties. And it's a difference, and then we didn't turn the ball over.
That's the key. You didn't turn the ball over and didn't get penalized, and the Wolverines continue to blow Minnesota out in the second half. We'll be back to take a look at those highlights. But before we do, let's hear from that number 90, that new defensive backfield guy from the Wolverines.
I think the defense played well. Offense played even better. I think, I don't know. I was more shocked than anybody else in the whole stadium. It was a dream come true for a defensive lineman. Oh, I thought about it, but I never thought it would happen to me. If I had some blockers, I think I would have scored a touchdown.
Relive the magic of Michigan's run for the NCAA basketball championship in this exclusive home video, Shock the World. Shock the World takes you from the beginning basket to March Madness and beyond, with highlights, behind-the-scenes footage, and special postseason commentary by head coach Steve Fisher. To order, call 1-800-323-2536. Call now and receive free this official NCAA Final Four championship poster. For your copy of Shock the World and free poster, call 1-800-323-2536.
For the second half together, and you know, the team is, I think we're just ready to, you know, take on every team that we face now.
Derek Alexander set a record also, 4 touchdown catches in one game. That is a record. And you said last week, one of the things you had to do was coach discipline so you wouldn't get the penalties. Did you coach discipline? I mean, it showed up a little bit in the game against Minnesota.
Well, Jim, you don't know what really works, but I think we talked about it a lot, but we also had every guy last week that had any penalties, we had him do some extra running to drive the point home, so to speak, and we will do it in the future because we know that that's something we can do to win the big games.
You had a big lead at half. They received the ball, and this is their first play from scrimmage. This almost, again, had to frost you just as much as the kickoff.
Right, this is unbelievable here that they roll out, they fake a pass, then they get Lewis behind us, and once he gets out, he's gone. And you talk about records, this is one against us that we obviously do not like to see.
They missed the extra point, makes it 35-13. But again, I think the most important thing is that offensively, you guys didn't let down in the second half. That could have been a different situation,
right,
but you don't let down in the second half offensively.
Exactly, and Wheatley gets loose here and has a great gain, and then we come back with a flanker screen, really. Elvis looking to his left, hits Derek Alexander, and he runs one across the field. Picks up a great block here, right there by Walter Smith, and then goes into the end zone.
That is his 4th. That touchdown sets the record of individual 4 touchdown receptions in one game for Michigan. You get the ball back, and here's a play that you coach, right?
Right, this is me. I'm responsible for this. I told him I'd call him wrong way Walter. We had a reverse going to the right. He came back to the left, but Walter Smith is a very strong youngster, and he's very emotional. And I think you can see part of that right here, and he's about exhausted when he goes in here. But what an excellent run. And, of course, the kids go crazy because they really like Walter.
That's it. They love Walter, right, and they like him. They're glad to see him do well.
Right. One of the reasons, Jim, is because he blocks so hard. He's such a physical player. Then one of Wheatley's longest runs of the day was right there when he went around left side.
He didn't break a big one against Minnesota, but he sure did a lot of good hard running.
Had a lot of 8, 10, 12-yard runs. There he gets us down to the 2, and then the next play here we see him going over to the left. Couple plays later.
Is he running better between the tackles?
I think so, and I think he's finding his holes much better. You know, that running the ball is not as easy as it sometimes you think, even when you have the big hole.
And we should give the defense some credit here. They really did a good job on Fleetwood.
Our defense is outstanding. You don't have the ball 89 plays to your opponent's 53 unless your defense is playing well. And as I said, here's Shea Foster on a trap up inside. Our defense has had, in the last 2 games, 0 first down conversions against them in 25 attempts, and that's something special. Here's Todd Collins hitting Mercury Hayes out there in the flat in single coverage.
4th and 1, you go for it. Jesse Johnson running at the tailback position. He's making some great cuts.
Right, he has a good run in there. He's quick. He maneuvers quite well. Then we had a penalty, and then Shea Foster went up inside. Very strong physical run. Goes in the end zone.
I mean, he left a wake of Minnesota players behind him. 63-13 the final. You were real happy after the game, but you know, no coach is ever really very, very happy after a game. Even a big win like that, you got to have something to work on. And I would say, in your instance, against Minnesota, the 2 things you got to work on: pass protection from the outside because Elvis got some pressure.
Exactly.
And your kicking game still, especially from placement, needs work.
Yes, in our kickoffs, that's the worst thing we're doing right now. But we did eliminate the penalties and the turnovers. But as you say, Elvis got hit a lot today throwing the ball, which really goes unnoticed when the ball is caught. So that's something we have to do. And we got to give Minnesota some credit, too. They were not a bad football team, particularly as the score indicated.
How about special teams? You a little concerned about that? Because they did get some kickoff returns on you.
Oh, no question about it. And going into this game, we were #1 in kickoff returns. They were #2. And coming out of this game, I think they moved ahead of us. But this game, I have to say, more than any game that we've played in a while, the players did a great job because they kept our focus. And, Jim, the thing we got to understand that everyone doesn't, we're only 4-0 in the Big Ten. We got 4 games to play, and we got a lot of work ahead of us. It's not going to be easy.
Not going to be easy. The Wolverines have to continue on to their 5th straight Big Ten championship. They got 4 more to win. We'll be back and talk about the 1,000th game. That happened to be against Minnesota. But first, let's hear from a quarterback who's been breaking out of slump big time.
I was kind of in a bad groove. It's like a baseball player having a bad week or a bad month or something like that. And I knew I was going to come out of it. And with the help of Coach Cameron and the other quarterbacks, you know, I got through it. Now I'm just on my way now. It's a great thing to beat Jim's, you know, all yardage passing thing. And but the good thing about it is that we're just still winning. And that's more important for me than anything else because I want to get back to the Rose Bowl. And that's a #1 priority. If records come with it, it's great. But the Rose Bowl is more important.
Touchdown against Minnesota Saturday may not have seemed historic to most, but in the great tradition of Michigan football, it was indeed historic. You see, the 1992 Minnesota game was Michigan's 1,000th intercollegiate football contest. Way back in 1879, Irving Ike Pond scored the Wolverines' first touchdown in their first ever game. Of these 1,000 games, Michigan has won nearly 3 out of every 4 contests, an amazing 73%. 466 of the victories have come at home on Regents Field, Ferry Field, or Michigan Stadium. It was at the turn of this century that this tradition of excellence really developed. Fielding H. Yost arrived in Ann Arbor from West Virginia, and in 25 years, Yost and his Michigan teams were responsible for 165 wins in 204 games. Fritz Chrysler took over the reins in 1937, and following Yost's tradition, won 71 of 90 games. In 1969, Bo Schembechler continued the Michigan tradition and led the Wolverines through their most successful period. 198 victories in 21 years, and Bo became Michigan's all-time winningest coach. 8 times in their historical 1,000 games, Michigan has been declared national champion. On 36 occasions, Michigan has won the Big Ten championship. 97 players have been named All-American in Michigan's 1,000 games. The 2 biggest names have been Tom Harmon and Desmond Howard. These 2 players have been the only Wolverines to win the coveted Heisman Award. Harmon, old number 98, stood the college football world on its ear back in 1940, leading Michigan to a 7-1 record that included 5 shutouts. 51 years later, Desmond Howard won Michigan's 2nd Heisman by one of the largest margins in the award history. Howard scored 23 touchdowns in the season of '91, and all of them were spectacular. But more than players, Michigan's 1,000 games have produced moments and teams no one can forget, like Yost's point-a-minute clubs of the early 1900s that once flogged Iowa 107-0. Or who can forget Benny Oosterbot, who is considered Michigan's finest athlete? He became Michigan's first 3-time All-American. Or how about 1947 and 48? The Wolverines won 19 consecutive games and were declared national champions 2 straight years. And can anyone forget Michigan's thrilling victory over Ohio State in the Snow Bowl in Columbus back in 1950? In 1969, Michigan's 24-12 upset over Ohio State is considered one of the greatest upsets in collegiate football history. And in 1979, maybe the greatest single play in Michigan history occurred against Indiana when Anthony Carter scored with no time left on the clock to pull out a victory. Certainly there are more great moments and great games and great players that we failed to mention. But it's clear the first 1,000 games have been special.
Thanks to Brian Hartley and Tad Van Scoik for help putting that together. And Gary, this is kind of fun. 1,000 games being a part of that tradition. You don't think about it, but once you see a piece like that, you kind of say, hey, that is kind of special, isn't it?
Right, and a lot of our players will look back on this and always remember that they were a part of it. And you know, I can't help but think I hear scores like 107-0. Then I knew you'd get that 69 game in there.
Oh,
when you
absolutely.
played. I knew we'd get a little something that, but that was one of the greatest victories I think
Well,
I've
you
ever
were
been
part
a part
of
of.
that too.
Right.
Sure, you were an assistant for Bo.
Exactly, but to beat so-called the best team ever in college football that day, I'll never forget that. That was a big day.
How about, I mean, from a head coach's perspective, I mean, you got the Yosts, the Chryslers, the Schembechlers, these legends that you're following in their footsteps. Does that, I mean, does that kind of say, gee, I better watch myself, I better be careful?
I think to some degree, and you got to look back, and you know Chrysler was a great coach, but Feeling H. Yost is really the guy who got it all started. And I think Bo had such an impact, and we're still reaping those benefits because, to me, he's just a great, great coach. And I had the opportunity to play for him when he was an assistant. But, you know, he's done so much for Michigan. But there were a lot of great men who are part of this tradition, and I think that speaks well of Michigan, and particularly when they do it with the same pursuits in the academic world as well.
Yeah. Anyway, the tradition of Michigan will continue on next year. By the way, game 1006, that's next year's opener. It's been changed. It will now be September 4th, prior to the Notre Dame game, and then September 18th will be an open date. So make sure and mark your calendars. Right now, we come to a scouting report of Purdue, but first, a Wolverine who almost became a Boilermaker talks about this one.
Purdue recruited me real hard, so my goal was to go in there and show them what they missed.
He stays number one, or if